Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Marie.
And this is Mock It, a podcast from MetroStar, where we take a deep dive look into UX design, trending design topics, and making our work transform the government. Let's get started.
Nice. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about project constraints and how we make them work in our favor. The theory goes, the less constraints you have, the less restrictions, the ideas will just pour in. But when the oyster is the world is your oyster, it can actually be a crippling effect because you have nowhere to start from, like nowhere to start to be creative and start to problem solve.
So before we get into really design specific constraints, I'm going to start big picture, do some project management from to quote our boss, the 30,000 foot level. So usually the three very popular constraints that people always talk about within a project are time, money, and scope / quality. There's like a little triangle. You can do it fast and cheap. You can do it, but the quality won't be there. You could do it like cheap and have great quality, but you run into a time constraint. And so you kind of just figure out what two of the three of those, that little trifecta that a lot of people go into with project management. So starting off from that level, how do those constraints affect projects?
That's a large question, Liz. Where do we want to start first? So I think those are really the three big ones, and any other constraint can group up into them. So it's great that we're starting with those. I think a lot of the times we have time is a big constraint, right? We want it done in 3 months or 2 months when it's really a lot more work to be done, or maybe we don't even have all the answers we need to start running, and not literally running, but running off with ideas and iterating. So then, time becomes an issue because you're waiting to get some pieces in order that you need at the beginning of a project. So I think that's probably the most common, I would think.
Yeah. And, obviously money is that you deal with that beforehand, in some cases in government contracting work, you kind of deal with the contract first before you sort of dive in. So I would agree with you that time is definitely one of the ones that we come across
more
a
often.
lot.
I would say quality, everyone wants to do a good job. I don't think anyone comes to work and is I'm going to sabotage this, or I'm going to so while it is a constraint, I feel that's the one, at least in our fields with our developers and other teams, we're proud of what we're working on. Great. We are excited to get up and solve those problems and make it a better product. That one is, it probably comes out to how much better we can go, right? How much of a solution we can get done. But then the great thing in our field is that we're always iterating, we're always improving. It's always either MVP is what it's called, or release 1, release 1.012, whatever, and then release 2. So we can always start to peel back the onion on our scope and get a little bit done every time.
So then going into the time constraints, because that's really one of the things that affects us most on our projects, from a design /UX /project management one. One of the things that I think we run into a lot is research.
Yes.
Doing research, having the time to do research, especially if you're working with users of your product, your app, your website, whatever you're working on, or your stakeholders, just getting your stakeholders all on the same page and together and getting their input definitely can be a constraint, and scheduling everyone and finding the time to really pinpoint who to talk to, what the needs are, what the requirements are really.
Yeah, how to better define those, right? Because our stakeholders, I think in most projects, they're there's an issue, we need to make it better. But better is such subjective, so big picture and open. That planning and time with our end users. And for some projects, like our project is nice. We've already done it. We've already gone through a research phase 2 times. I expect that we'll go again. We always seem to do a big chunk of research in the spring. And then as well as this fall, we've gotten little chunks. But right after really getting our client buy-in on how important it is for us to get ideas. So we went through the hypothesis-driven design route out of human-centered design. So where to get our buy-in, we went through the route of talking with stakeholders. So they weren't technically end users of our product, but they're users that have a lot of interaction with their end users. They interact with the product a lot as well. They have a lot of insight that was useful for us, that we were able to pull the patterns from that, get these hypotheses, which instead of testing by creating a solution on all that development work, we took those as hypotheses to question, to go to customers, and validated those to then inform the solutions and ideas we were going to propose.
Yeah, I definitely think that was a unique solution that our team came up with basically, we knew that we had access to stakeholders, and having them put themselves in the shoes of our end users and our clients to be like, if, you're this type of client, like, what would your user journey be? If you're this type of client, like, what are your typical questions or what are your pain points? I think that tactic has served us well, especially with, just a lot of projects, government, commercial, anything. Sometimes end user accessibility just, they're sometimes you just can't get to them. Sometimes, there's just like various factors. So you're not able to really like be one-on-one with them, like the pandemic, there are different things that just have happened. And I think that I really thought that was a great way that our team was able to sort of like flip the switch on things and really kind of come up with a great solution.
Right. And it saved us from going down a route of one solution that would have been fun and challenging and a lot of work, right? And a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of scope that end users in the end didn't really want. And we resolved that in, I'm not sure how many user interviews we did at that time, but right. So like a dozen user interviews and like 8 hours of analyzing it and looking through it. We found out like, right, that's a failed solution. So much better to learn then than like months down the pike you're launching and you realize that your product is a failure.
Exactly. So not to put you in my favorite hot seat, but I have to kick us off on like a specific design constraint. What about this? It's a popular phrase, mobile first design.
Yeah.
And as I sit on a lot of the mock-up meetings that I sat in one yesterday where we were going over this.
Oh yeah.
And how do certain like screen sizes impact designs, or some of those like design specific constraints impact?
Yeah. So right now we're jumping into design specific constraints. So I guess this would focus more on quality, right? If it would bubble up. Right. So the mobile phone, they got bigger for a second with iPhone 5 sunsetting, and now we're back to being smaller again. Our team was just talking about it with the flip phone, and all of those. So right on the mobile device, it's not only the screen size you have to consider, but also like what are people doing when they're on their mobile phones versus the desktop, right? I'm on the go, or it's like quick shots in between. I probably have distractions, sitting in a waiting room for something that I could just have to pop up at no time. So yeah, you have constraints as far as like focus and attention span, and then the size of the screen. So what is the most important things you want to communicate to your end user? What is the most important goals that they're trying to achieve while they're on that small phone? Space, the screen space. So those are really big constraints.
I really liked the attention span one that you brought up, because I wouldn't have thought about that. But like as a user, just like, like sometimes I just go on my phone for like a quick like 2 minutes, just like to break up whatever I'm doing. Like, but then like sometimes like, I get distracted, like the dog comes and sits on me, like the doorbell rings, and like I don't, I'm just like distracted from whatever I'm just like scrolling through on my phone. So that's a great point. I would have thought of I would have put in the words that you use, but that's so true.
It's much more of like a temporary focus than like you come and sit down at your desk or your kitchen table or wherever you're sitting down. It's like I'm setting up for a moment, a time frame to really focus in on whatever that task is that I'm about to do on the web or wherever.
So another tactic that our team has used has been using analytics when we've had some constraints to one, like the screen size. We've definitely looked at analytics to see what our end users are, what their devices of choice are, which has been super interesting with desktop versus mobile. There's a very like distinctive difference, but tablet, like that has become,
it's popping up more.
Yeah.
In the last year, we've had more tablet users.
Do you think that's from a design perspective, how does that play into things? Because it's you obviously have a bigger screen, but do you have the same functionality? Like, do you run into more like mobile functionality versus like desktop? Certain apps and websites are just easier to do on a desktop.
Yeah, and I think tablet is tricky because it isn't where we have to make the calls for what is the most important. It's like, well, I can kind of fit everything in the desktop, but is it the best layout, right? Is there that negative space so that I can take a break to process whatever I was looking at? It's that like weird middle child of like what, so you have to get like really focus in on what are they doing on the tablet size. Are they as much on the go as on your phone, or is it more of a desktop sitting down experience on the tablet?
Especially with all the accessories that you can buy for your tablet. Now you can literally turn it into a desktop very easily.
Yeah, especially some of like those PC versions of tablets. They're pretty snazzy.
Yeah. And like you kind of touched upon this with our team was talking yesterday about the flip phones, and then like the Samsung like tablet phone. I don't have a better word to call it because it's not exactly like a flip phone the way you would think of it, but it's like a foldable phone.
Yeah, like the screen folds, and
it becomes like a decent size when it's unfolded. So that's also, if something like that takes off, that's just like like another screen size to add in.
And I think we were talking about it yesterday with one of our colleagues, specifically even with the desktop sizes that we designed for. Right, that is a new one to consider. I'm not sure our project or maybe all projects need to worry about all device sizes, right? Like you want it to be decent enough, but if you have like a 2% usage at a certain screen size, like in the realm of like how much you prioritize it, you have to make concessions, right? Like that's part of the constraints. It's part of you, right? We can't meet everybody. Do we want to meet the 80%?
I was just going to ask, is this like the 80-20 rule that with design?
Yeah. So basically with everything in life, it's you want to serve at least 80%. In design, the 20% that we're not serving super well, like the experience that we want, right? We're serving them so that they're still able to do it, right? No one's not missing out on anything, but maybe it's not, maybe they're losing, I don't even know what one. All I can think about is like IE, how like maybe you lose some animation, but that's not screen sizes.
But the sentiments there.
Yeah, same concept.
Yeah, and the other thing that our team has done, which you've already touched on, and this is like, I feel like this is like the motto that you always like strive for our team with design. It's like iterate, and like incremental changes. Like then that way we can monitor and we can track and see how things are going. So that's something that I know our team has done, and like you've been like a huge proponent,
big advocate of that. I'm still trying to figure out how to better formulate sharing that and really getting everyone on it. Ironically, a lot of what happened yesterday is really good for this episode. I was just in another project call, and we're doing like a new technology, a new solution for our project. And how do you not drown in all of the things that we can do, right? When we do have a time constraint of in a couple of months, it's a new technology. We also had the time constraint of we don't have user research specifically for this. It is very much an iterative test trial run of a solution to see if it'll work. So where do you draw that line in the sand of what do we need to do at a minimum to be able to, like, you want to do enough so that it doesn't fail because you didn't do enough, but then not do too much. So if it's not successful, you didn't invest all of this. So where's the line in the sand of enough of a solution to go and put out, test, take back in what you've learned from it, and go again at it?
Yeah, I think that's something that like so many people want to hit it out of the ballpark right from like day one. Like 1.0 release is going to be the greatest thing that ever hit the world, you know?
Yeah.
And like really like learning your philosophy of incremental changes and just like iterating, like,
right, because you always learn more every time you put something out. There's something to learn from it, like another perspective, another like, oh man, now we can do that functionality. What if we could do this that you never would have had the second part without the first? So I'm really big on that iterative learning.
Yeah, and I think that's like you've like taught our team to be like it's okay, like you can embrace the iteration. Like it's not like that your first iteration was a failure or your first launch was a failure. It's just that was as you said, it's the information that you had at that time.
Yeah, it's the best that you could do at that time. I know our team knows a lot. I don't expect anyone to know everything. I don't know everything, but we can always continue to learn more.
Yeah. And then with that, so we've touched upon this, and with the intro that you said, people kind of view constraints as a bad thing, but they don't have to be. They can be something that you iterate off of and like spark designs and like.
Yeah, I heard a great quote the other day that was, right, you can't think outside of the box if there isn't a box.
Well, that's trippy.
Isn't that great? Like,
that is a good one, yeah.
They're always like, think outside of the box. Or like creatives always think outside of the box. Well, if there's no box, right, like if the world is your oyster, you have nowhere to start from. I can't think outside of the box because everything is possible. So to me, it's like incredibly crippling. Like I don't even know where to start. I have no opinions, so nothing to base any of the decisions I make off of anything. That's my favorite quote I've heard recently.
That's a really good one. I'm like, I'm like gonna like when I drive home like ponder that one. I'm like, where is my box that I like
that I need to think outside of?
Yeah, and but I guess for kind of wrapping up this episode, it's like embrace constraints. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, right. You should embrace them. Right. There is the flip side that I'm sure someone's been like, well, sometimes like clients are overly prescriptive and this and that. And yes, unfortunately, sometimes you have people that kind of use you as the tool to create their vision because they don't have the skill set. But sometimes that's just like some practice at your skills of like, the production aspect, so that when you are getting creative with solutioning, you can nail out the production really fast. Looking at with your cup filled up rather than empty.
Oh, I think that's a really positive note to end this podcast on. So with that, this is Mock It. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and join us next time. As always, if you're interested in learning more about how government and tech collide, visit metrostar.com and follow us on our socials.